Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Frieren, more specifically how to build her, a breakdown of everything you need to know about her, and why she's actually probably one of the most insane characters we've seen thus far. Without further ado though, let's get straight into it, explaining her kit. Now, the first skill we need to talk about in general is her skill 3, and first and foremost, this gives her an attack increase for 3 turns, which is pretty impactful. However, in addition to this dispels all buffs and increases the combat readiness of Frieren by 50%. To add to this also penetrates the casters, or rather the target's defense by 50%. But what's most important to know here is that just in general, this is good for combat readiness, but also applies an attack increase to the caster. Now, even before we go further than this, it should be worth noting that despite this being a big AoE and having pen, this is not even the highest, or in most cases, the highest damage dealing ability for Frieren, which is pretty impressive. Next, we have to talk about Frieren's S2 though, the highest form of magic. This is a S2 passive that grants her a 40% resource increase to all allies, and again, as a reminder, this is only at the start of battle. Now, during battle, when she has at least 4 souls or higher, she grants herself defensive magic, and after being attacked, she increases the combat readiness of all allies by 10%. As a reminder for defensive magic, this will continuously apply over and over, and with this, if you aren't able to either sleep, debuff, or deal with the souls of Frieren through some means, she actually stays alive for quite a lot longer than you'd expect, as she keeps reapplying the shield, and again, she takes no damage whatsoever from abilities when she has this up and active. Now, for her skill 1, this is actually one of the more impactful abilities in her kit when it comes to damage. Now, you might have thought that the pen from the skill 3 was way more insane, but actually, if you soul burn Frieren's skill 1 and then activate it on her turn, this soul burn into extra attack is super significant in terms of damage and impact. And to be honest, although I am running Frieren currently at a slower build and have been testing her a little bit between fast and slow, the faster variation, though may be nice for resource generation or applying a bit of damage or chip damage, really does not compare to just how insane being 160 or 170 speed, which we'll talk about in a moment, is, as again, you not only give yourself immunity after being able to use your skill 1, but you also deal an insane amount of damage that scales also with the enemy's lost health. Now, beyond build, we should also talk, or rather beyond skills, we should actually talk about build. Now, Frieren has a couple different builds, likely that many people can be trying or can test at this point. One of those is likely the 260 to 280 range in terms of speed with as much damage as possible. However, I think one thing that's pretty interesting about her kit right now is that because of how strong and how reliably she can protect herself, running something like triple torrent might not be the worst idea ever, although of course you could obviously use something like destruction and torrent at the same time. Now, with this, I do think that in terms of main stats, you'll definitely either prefer to use something like a crit damage or a crit rate main if you're insane, and if you're able to manage it with her insane set of substats and base stats. However, to add to this, you'll definitely want attack percent and either speed boot or attack boot, depending on how much you're looking for in terms of damage. Now, for artifact, of course, you could use a normal book. However, as a reminder, at the start of battle, if you have her artifact, she not only gains the same amount of souls from Tagahells, but instead she also gains a 100% chance, assuming you have this artifact maxed, chance to gain 2 souls as well. Now, between the two, this is actually way more annoying than you'd think in terms of being able to strip the buffs, or rather strip the defensive magic buff off of Frieren, and otherwise she kind of just stands still and does an insane amount of damage with no one really able to counter her. Next, however, we should talk about PvP, as this is where I actually think Frieren will shine the most. Now, in terms of what we've seen thus far, I've been playing a little bit of her currently. A few of these variations, or a few of these matches, are definitely a bit of a familiar showcase, as you could probably imagine. However, regardless of what the match entails or how I end up playing out some of these fights, it does kind of feel like Frieren not only goes kind of underrated or kind of under the radar and people forget about how insane she is, she ends up dealing with counter units quite effectively, as again, you're able to in most cases have extra souls left over in order to counter or solo in some cases towards the end. In a case like this, for instance, I kind of thought that I was completely cooked basically after turn 1, because I realized kind of early on that I wasn't going to be able to cut, and as you see here, I actually ended up getting cut had a Conqueror Lilius debuff my entire team, give me attack down. But as we scale and push through, and as again we just basically have these two characters that can't die, and effectively this defensive magic doesn't allow Frieren to basically get debuffed at all, I was able to continuously throw off or deal a bunch of damage with both the Renak but also the Frieren. And again, look, if you just take a look at the damage here, it is pretty impactful and significant in terms of not just damage from the Renak but also in terms of damage from the Frieren. As you'll see here in a moment as well, the enemy tries to deal with or tries to take damage or one shot the Frieren through any means or burst through all my souls, but this is much more difficult than you'd think, especially with how fast some of the characters on my team are. And again, once I was able to actually take a turn with Frieren specifically here, you can see I was actually able to I wouldn't say one shot, but definitely deal a lot more damage than you'd expect. Of course, I would also say that in terms of survivability, this is where the souls are super impactful in terms of her artifact. But if you just take a look here, that's 4,300, which again is not the most insane amount of damage, but this is with an attack down as a reminder. It is pretty impactful. Now, again, because I used my souls here, I did end up running out of my defensive magic. However, with just literally one more hit, I was able to reapply it and give myself a bit of survivability for one extra turn. Now, this is where things got a little bit dicey, as again, I was almost about to die here, but then once I got the skill null and once I was able to generate more souls here with the Frieren, I fortunately was of course able to give myself more survivability, give myself attack increase, and as you'll see here in a moment, I basically one-shot his entire team with Frieren, which was a little bit disturbing. Now, as you'll see here in a moment, this is even without souls that did 12,901 damage to an Abyssal Euphine, and with just my S1 and of course obviously Gab and crit damage, I was able to do 18,000 damage to Genesis Ross. Pretty insane things if I say so myself. Now, in terms of being a PvE unit, you do obviously have to consider the way that Frieren is going to work in terms of auto, and given that most characters at this point have basically been solved, or most hunts or most PvE fights, at most I think that Frieren could be maybe used for something like Rift or Constellation if that ends up being the case. However, I think most people or most players in most cases will probably be using Frieren for something like PvP or in Guild War, as again there are tons of characters that you'll actually be pairing alongside Frieren herself. To be more specific, most of, or I would say the most prominent, focus or fighting spirit characters that I think you'll gain the most value out of is the newly buffed Famir, who I think is absolutely bonkers with Frieren, as you are able to use her S2 passive basically turn 1. In addition to this, you also have characters like Commander Pavel, who also gain a lot of value in terms of being able to use her or use his skill 2 just after one crit. To add to this as well, we also have characters like Teiyu, who are also pretty significant or also pretty valuable as characters that have access to a turn 1 quote-unquote passive activating. And although the list obviously extends into infinity and there are tons of characters that can make use of Frieren's passive, those were just some of the few that I found to be extremely powerful or honestly pretty funny to look at. Though of course there are of course still, I guess, pros and cons that we should go over when it comes to Frieren day 1. Now, in terms of her actual play, the pros for her is that, yes, I mean, she is obviously a do-it-all kind of character. She buffs the team. She's an evasion type-based DPS at the same time. She can output the damage that you'd want from basically a true DPS mage, and at the same time she does have a pretty impactful and synergistic artifact that not only benefits the team but also benefits her own playstyle. To add to this, of course, it's Frieren and she's a collab, so I think in most cases people love the design of this character. But to add to this, not only is she able to again provide her services as a DPS, she is kind of so insane in terms of how versatile she can be as a DPS, buffer, and survivability sort of character that you can actually pick her probably in the 1, 2, or 3rd pick slot without much worry. Now, that said, and kind of to play the devil's advocate, or I guess to point out the double standard, or maybe not the double standard, but the double-edged sword when it comes to Frieren being picked earlier and her versatility is that a lot of the characters that you'll likely find with Frieren are kind of countered by characters like Elvira, Solitaria, or things that just remove resource generation, which of course is the obvious counter to someone like Frieren. And although this is pretty significant, it is, you know, something that you could definitely bypass with draft and is way more easy to bypass in something like RTA as opposed to Guild War or Arena. Now, that said as well, in terms of playstyle, I could definitely see something like Frieren's speed being a major concern or tuning issue that people have to deal with. And I can definitely see in some cases where people may have wanted a faster Frieren as opposed to a slower one or vice versa. And this might be a pain point for some players. However, I think that in terms of really cons as a whole, outside of just being a collab unit, outside of I guess wanting decent gear quality, and outside of I guess needing or wanting to pair herself alongside resource generation characters that can be of course countered by resource denying characters, Frieren doesn't really have that many counters at all. As a final kind of like conclusion and mention for my notes on Frieren in general, I've had pretty good success in general fighting against basically any team that allowed me to use someone like Famir. And even in a match like this where basically nothing happened and all I was able to do was get off the Famir S3, and I was able to stall for a little bit longer, this is still a team lineup that basically got one shot the second that my Frieren took a turn. And I mean, just in case you're curious in terms of damage, this S3 obviously was on a defense broken team and was also alongside attack increase, but again, the damage here was still pretty significant. That was still 27,000 damage. There is nothing super crazy. I didn't even get to soul burn. And obviously I ended up losing to the guy later. But I just think that in terms of play and in terms of the way that Frieren can be used right now, so long as you're picking her and have a backup in terms of draft to obviously glue the team together, I think she's pretty impactful, or she's going to be pretty strong regardless of where you pick her right now. Though I would definitely again caution you if you're relying too heavily on Frieren and you aren't able to make a team work without her being active, as again, certain characters, especially like if you use a Commander Pavel, will not be able to really work if you end up pairing her or pairing him rather with someone like a mid as opposed to Lidica. You get the idea. In any case though, obviously she's a collab unit, and my conclusive or my summary, my day one thoughts about this character is that ultimately you should be pulling for her. Well, mostly because she's the real limited character that epicseven has to offer, with it being a collaboration unit. And otherwise, guys, I'm honestly a pretty big fan of the collab as a whole. The character not only looks pretty fun in terms of playing her, she also has quite good designs, and I also am kind of a big fan of her artifact. Anyways though, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks again for watching. As always, these are just my day one impressions and my day one guide to Frieren, as again I've been playing her quite a bit, have been theory crafting her, as she's pretty cool. And otherwise, thanks again for watching all. I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night. Oh, date has changed. Perfect timing.